as readers, and as members. I'm going to introduce our first reader tonight, Joel Muse. Joel is a musician, architect, and photographer. As a writer, he often tells stories that challenge prevailing assumptions about homelessness. As a reader, he validates the work of peers and says the authenticity of the stories stand for themselves. He said this last year as well. In addition to reading and writing, he enjoys capturing time and place on film. The anthology cover, right here, this beautiful thing here, comes from a large portfolio of images he took during his travels. Please welcome Joel.
Thank you, Rossina. Containing Martha Washington, Seattle. The first time I discovered that people lived in storage units was on a sunny Sunday in Seattle, when all the banks were closed and the Capitol Hill Block Party had effectively put a run on all ATM machines. All I had on me was a blank checkbook for a different account with not much money in it, so I used it to extend some momentary credit towards a 6-foot by 8-foot, steel-lined, concrete-floored unit, a self-storage unit in an enormous, climate-controlled facility where row after row of corrugated, steel-lined units were exactly identical, where orange garage doors rattled like a train wreck with the slightest touch, enough to shudder the devil. "What you have to look for," said the office manager, "is this piece of wood." She tapped the post with her walking stick. "That's when you know to turn to get to the elevator." I pushed my brand new 88-key Nord keyboard synthesizer down the aisle with all the computer gear I owned, plus a large black North Face backpack and a canvas Filson satchel, all on a loud, creaking cargo cart. Signs posted along the walls along the way stated clearly a 5-mile-per-hour speed limit strictly enforced, just in case those cargo carts could go any faster. If only my damn ATM card had worked and it wasn't Sunday and the banks weren't closed, I'd have a hotel room. Instead, there I was at a storage facility, reeling from vertigo with all the unexpected exchanges and terrible luck. Still, I was determined to do this on my own. No family, no help, just me and all that talent people kept talking about. "Remember, no sleeping," the manager said before returning to her office. She pointed to the stipulation on the lease contract. I nodded. As soon as she disappeared, I started unloading my stuff off the cart. Just then, an alarming cacophony of garage doors opening awoke my confused state of mind. With the disappearance of the manager, the rows and aisles seemed to spring to life with inhabitants. People emerged from several units, opening up as if they were awakening to the dawn of the lime-green rays of fluorescent light. I could not help but gawk at the strategically placed couches and chairs placed just inside the gape of the doors, which were conveniently placed for comfortable seating. I resisted the obvious question. "So, do you live here?" I interpreted this place as a sort of second home for hobbyists and otherwise backyard garage industries. I was intrigued, comforted, and overwhelmed by this place as an adaptive environment. In its alternative sense, the strictly moderated spaces aptly stocked with the needs of a person cut off from normal society also reminded me of the chambers inside Egyptian tombs. To return the cart, I strode down the aisle, searching for that lone vertical piece of timber amongst the sea of sterile, white corrugated steel reverberating the humming of the light ballasts. I could see down each aisle that people were rearranging their things. All of them seemed to have strategically placed what looked like incredibly comfortable couches inside their units. If it weren't for the incredibly monotonous view and reverberating crashes and mechanical buzzing, it might have been a pleasant homecoming moment there. We were like any other tenants, only we lived in storage units. But alas, all I could think of was what the manager had repeatedly said to me. "Remember, no sleeping." As I approached the elevator, I saw the glow of neon and a fluffy texture of an incredibly silly hat. The brim protruded forward, and under it peered out the youthful eyes of an aging woman who walked with a cane and reached toward me. Her skin was like cellophane wrapping the bones of her hand. "Hello, young man," she said as I warmed her hand with mine. "You know, when I was young, most people's rent was only 25% of their income. Now the government suggests 45%, but most people's rents are even higher. Nowadays, this is all I can afford. But it doesn't stop me from coming out and having fun like I did in the old days." "Nor should it stop you," I said with a grin. Her name was Martha Washington, and in her younger years, before the rattling of orange metal doors and concrete floors of self-storage, she lived in a mansion on Capitol Hill. Martha said she was one of the help, though she assured me she was treated just as well as one of the family. I remember the sincerity in her voice as she recalled her life, how convinced she was of a time long past when she was loved. I had had a rough year, severing ties with my family, searching for a new home, and while I sat there with Martha in the storage facility that afternoon, found myself feeling oddly comforted and normal, like a gender-bending octogenarian Elvis or Jesus in a purple jumpsuit. The old woman, or maybe it was her touch, helped me understand the strength of my own grip, the sound of my own laughter, the possibilities of me belonging somewhere, somehow. When we talked, I didn't think about how she got to the bathroom, if she broke the rules by sleeping, if she felt safe with her door unlocked, which unit was hers, what she did from 9 p.m. till 6 a.m. when the facility doors were shut. We never got to discuss such things. They didn't matter. Chicago. Months after meeting Martha, when I was on my own and homeless once more, I was determined to spend my Thanksgiving in Chicago without having to shudder to my mother as she slandered my father, and without having to pay for shelter. My plan was to enjoy the contemporary plays and jazz and booze of the city with what little money I had, and sleep on the elevated train. But after 2 dizzying days of finding free food and smoking cigarette butts in my pipe, I found myself desperate for shelter, even enough to consider the Pacific Garden Mission, a place I once noticed as a child because of the bright neon cross hanging above the building doorway. By the third evening, I had developed an intuition about the weather, and that evening's peach dusk promised that it would become another cold night. Besides, I was sick of the vertigo I had developed attempting to sleep on the elevated train for the 2 previous nights. Dozing off while traveling forward and waking up while traveling backward was nauseating. I also learned that begging for food on the train was a social disconformity so severe that not even I would attempt to make a habit out of it. In one incident, 2 girls had shared a sandwich and both refused the last bite, so I asked if I could have it. One of them started singing, "You had me at hello." It was an experience so delightful I vowed never again to repeat it. I decided I would subject myself to the unknowns of the Pacific Garden Mission instead. Trekking my way through the city, I took my last ride on the elevated train. I hurtled down the steel-stilted structure and strode south across the cracked streets, fleeting from curb to curb in avoidance of traffic to Canal Street, and approached the famous neon Jesus Saves cross I had glimpsed at so many years ago. Someone directed me to the entrance in the rear. I walked along the institutional brick wall and approached the monumental front desk, which looked like a judge's platform. "How do I check in?" I asked the man behind the desk, a desk that was imposingly elevated and gated like a police precinct. "That ended at 8 and it's nearly 9, he said gruffly, and then asked, "Do you believe in the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ?" "I believe there is probably a guy named Jesus," I replied. "Well, I guess that's honest," he said. "Have you eaten? Are you hungry?" "Starving." On this night, my first night at the Pacific Garden Mission, I was fortunate enough to be allowed to break the rules and have a commercially wrapped sandwich and a bag of chips. It wasn't much, but it was enough to quell the barking dogs of hunger. I limped to the day room on my throbbing feet where I estimated up to 400 men sat in folding chairs listening to the whooping and hollering of a man bestowed with Jesus something. He spoke as if licensed to do so, as if we had to listen because he had knowledge about God he needed to bestow on us, as if he could judge us if we didn't. Whatever we did beyond the walls of the mission, after all, was something we ought to be ashamed of, wasn't it? Iowa City. About 2 years from that day, I will do it again. Alone, homeless, and living in a storage unit, only this time, like Martha, I will do it with more confidence. I'll have a leather chair, a squishy mat to insulate me from the cold concrete, and some denim rugs. I'll get the furnishings from the nearby farm store. I will think to myself how it's all quite fashionable and even call it urban agritecture. A battery-operated lantern and an inflatable mattress will give me light and a flat support to rest. There'll be a bathroom in the filling station next door and a creek on the other side, but the cold will creep in through the uninsulated steel roof, so I will have to move on with winter approaching. But for a while, listening to the soothing coos and quacks of Canadian geese by the creek will give me a charming alternative to watching a movie or listening to headphones. I will sleep quite comfortably, but wake up freezing cold and scared that if I can't find my shoes, wallet, and coat fast enough, I'll pee my pants trying to get to the bathroom on my way to buying the obligatory cup of coffee that goes with urinating in gas stations.